My father's family is from northern Peru. We have a house in a town and one in a beach nearby. I've heard this story when visiting the town as I was growing up. This happened to my father when he was 7 or 8 years old in the 70s. He had climbed a tall tree on a grove near town and was sitting on top of a big branch eating fruit. It was in the afternoon. There was lots of wind and the branches moved, but it was relaxing. Suddenly, he felt as though something's watching him. He focused and saw 2 eyes looking at him from a branch on another tree. He first only saw the eyes. He says that they're much bigger than a person's, hypnotic looking and intelligent. He then saw the rest of what appears to be a monkey or small person, and it looks terrified. He immediately jumps off and starts running into town. When he told his grandfather what he'd seen, he said it was a junda, like a goblin, and that they take away little children, especially those who have not been baptized. His grandfather was a farmer and saw many strange things on the fields out of town. This story happened in the 30s. The generation of my father's grandfather, a group of 4 men, had gone on horse to the Mont, like wild forest in this dry area, and were returning to town at the end of daylight. The paths were such that they had to go one behind the other. Suddenly, they realise that the last man is missing. They decide to backtrack and first find the horse without the rider, and then him, on the ground passed out. They took him to town and he was babbling and crying but not coming to. A priest was taken to him. When he finally come to his senses, he said he had seen a bolto in the road. Bolto would translate into blob. This is just a mass occupying space that's much darker than its surroundings and far bigger than a person. He said that his horse refused to go anywhere near it, then remembering nothing else. Finally, this story was told to me from an uncle of mine. It was about a man walking back from the beach to the town at the end of daylight. The beach is separated from the town by a desert area with dunes and some small mountains. I think it's 500 meters, so it's about a 20-minute climb. The man was passing one of the mountains when he saw light coming from it. He got closer to the mountain and out of the road, and saw that the side of the mountain was open, and if there was a big doorway, and inside the mountain it was full, and there were fields of corn, but the corn was gold looking. He got closer to the doorway and thought he saw hooded men. The men were inviting him to come over, but he got a really bad feeling and went away, and could never find that area again afterwards. I guess I'll write what happened in chronological order. To preface this, I should mention that all of this took place back on my reservation. I'm from Algonquin First Nation from Canada. Another thing I should mention is that on the res, traditional beliefs and legends of the paranormal are still a big part of our community. The attitude of most people towards the paranormal is one of assurance. To us, the paranormal is a regular part of our life. We believe in a spirit world, and we believe that sometimes these beings can cross over from their world to ours. Well, I tell paranormal stories to my non-native friends. They're always in disbelief of what I tell them, but they've had no paranormal experiences, unlike me having a bunch, and most everyone I know on the res has had one. I don't really care to explain it, but it is what it is. Anyway, here's the story. This happened in the fall of 2011 when I was 16 years old. I was living in a nearby city with my mum, so I can get a better education than the one I can get at home. But we'd go back every single week to see my dad and little brother. One Friday, during the drive back home, I got a text from a friend of mine. She told me about a party that was happening that night, and She said to me, when am I going to be home so they can pick me up? I gave her a time and that was that. When we got home, as soon as we stepped inside the house, I see my dad and cousins sitting at the kitchen table drinking. They're both cops on the res, so usually beers with his partner on a Friday evening happens. Means that they had a particularly tough week at work though. Typically, the toughest cases they deal with are ones around children. So a part of me felt sad immediately that something bad's happened. They both look tired and drained, but they're happy to see us. We say our greetings, catch up a little, and my dad asks me if I have any plans. I tell him about the party and where it'll be, and he and our cousin share a weird look. Why are you guys making that face? Did something happen? I say. I don't know, should we tell her? My cousin said, looking at my dad. He laughed and said, yeah, we probably should, because I'm gonna have to be going to a cottage pretty deep in the woods later that evening. They start off by saying the first strange call they get is on a Monday night. There's an elderly woman saying that there's people outside of her home knocking on all of her windows. She can't see anyone, but there must have been at least 3 people, judging by all the different locations of the knocking. They arrive at the woman's home, inspect all around the house, even the woods, but find nothing. They tell her that it's probably some teenagers playing tricks on her, but sadly there's nothing they can do really, besides patrol the area in case they come back. On Wednesday night, the same woman called again with the same problem. It had been raining that day too, and there was mud everywhere, so they figure at least they're gonna know where they went. But they don't find a thing. This is when they start feeling like something is off, because one of the windows where the woman was, she's adamant that there was someone there, but it's completely impossible to get there without going through a huge puddle. This is when they start to think she's lying, but they just told her the same thing they told her friend a few nights prior. By Thursday night, everyone on the res had been talking about these strange experiences. It turns out that she wasn't the only one experiencing it. She was just the one to call. I mean, all of this is taking place on a res, so it wasn't long before people were linking it to the supernatural. My dad still wasn't sure if it's just a group of teens playing a prank on people, but they get another call from the same woman for the same reason. They rush over there, but are met with the same situation, except this time, the neighbour walked over looking pale as a ghost. That's saying something for him. He says, "Is this about the knock-in?" They notice he's a little shaky. "Yeah. Did you see something?" They ask him, and he nods and said, "You guys are gonna think I'm crazy, but yeah." And he goes on to explain what he saw. He said he stepped out for a cigarette on his front porch when he heard knocking. He looked around to see where it's coming from, and when he looked to his neighbour's house, he saw it. There's a black figure standing outside of the woman's window. The same one with the puddle, looking at her home. He said it looked humanoid in stature, but completely made out of a shadow. You could tell it was something solid-ish, but you cannot make out any features on it. He stared at it completely in shock, and watched that thing as it knocked a couple of times, then darted around the house knocking on every window, moving so quick it's like a blur, and it went around the house a few times. The man ran across the road into the tree line, behind one tree in particular. The man was frozen but couldn't look away. It then leaned out from behind the tree, staring directly at him with yellow eyes that reflected the light similar to a cat's, and then it smiled, showing its small but numerous pointed sharp teeth. "I almost had a heart attack," he said while it happened. Fast forward to Friday. Stories are being exchanged all over the res about sightings and experiences people are having. On top of that, multiple people are experiencing the knock-in. There's also quite a few sightings with everyone describing the creature in the same way. One woman was bringing her trash to the side of the road, and she thought she saw the woman somewhere in her peripheral vision standing near the trees. She walks back up the driveway and into her home, feeling as though she's being watched. Right before she's about to open her door to go back inside to her home, she looked back and saw two reflective yellow eyes staring at her from the trees, saying it's about 5 feet above the ground. Another couple was driving at night and said they saw a humanoid figure too. "You sure you still want to go to that party?" my dad asked. But my friends were already pulling into the driveway. I gave my family hugs and kisses goodbye, and they told me to be careful, but I felt fine. A common belief among native people is that negative energy attracts negative energy. Therefore, an evil spirit will draw to people with unresolved issues, traumas, and sinners, I suppose. If you're someone who's spiritual, self-aware, and basically a good person, you're pretty good. So I get to the party, and within 20 minutes, the conversation shifts towards the paranormal experiences everyone's having. I'm really curious about what everyone has to say, because they have stories that I haven't heard yet, but my friend, being 17 and all, couldn't hold her alcohol very well, and was crying about how she wishes she was closer with her brother. I'm trying to make her feel better while listening to everyone else's stories. One of the people from the party was related to the neighbour of the woman who was calling the police. The experience really shook him up, and my friend was just explaining everything that was going on. For one, he smudged his entire home, which is something people do for extra protection from the paranormal. He also went on multiple visits to the elders around the community asking for advice. What we do know about paranormal experiences on the res is that they don't happen as much as they used to. If you talk to one of our elders, they'll have endless stories and even more advice to give about how to protect yourself. One of the explanations that was given to us is that the shadow guy is evidence that someone was doing unauthorized shaky tent ceremony. If you don't know what that is, it's basically like an Ouija board session that takes place inside of a tent. People stand around the tent while the medicine man or medicine woman goes inside asking questions. The tent begins to shake and you hear voices of the spirits coming through. I've never personally been to one because we haven't had a good enough reason to make one, but typically our ancestors use shaken tent ceremonies when they're starving in the dead of winter and need some direction on where the nearest food is. My mum's been to one. Her story's crazy. She described hearing multiple men and women only speak in native tongue, and they're upset that people were doing a shaken tent ceremony when they're not on the verge of death. The people there had to explain that they're only doing the ceremony to prove that it was real, as we'd been losing our culture as a result of residential schools. But the spirits are angry, saying that the bridge between the two worlds should never be opened unless necessary, because you don't know who you're talking to. It could be evil spirits. You don't know. Anyway, the elders told him that this spirit crossed over into our world because of a shaken tent ceremony. Someone on the res has been doing them without consultation of the elders, so we start thinking about who would do that without the proper guidance, and so. Then, two of the drunkest dudes say, "Oh, I'm not scared. That thing can't do anything," basically egging it all on, and we're all looking at each other like, why would you disrespect an evil spirit? That's exactly how it's attracted to you. And that's when I decided to leave the sunroom where everyone's hanging out. I went to the living room to console my drunk crying friend when I noticed the rocking chair outside of the porch moving. I slowly moved away, refusing to make direct eye contact, but I do in my peripheral vision. Anyway, I'm inside the cottage and I keep seeing this rocking chair moving back and forth. But another thing we're raised to do in our culture is to ignore paranormal. Spirits feed on energy people give towards them, so if you freak out, if you get angry, if you start crying or yell at it, that's exactly what it wants. It thrives on energy of any kind. So while I knew something messed up was happening, I wasn't about to pay attention. 5 minutes now go by and I still see it out the corner of my eye. That's when my friend screams, and she runs on the other side of the sunroom. My other friend, too, sprints to the girl, number 1, who's sitting, and busts through the French doors onto the balcony. All of this happens in a split second, but I immediately go to the patio and ask what's going on. Girl 1 is crying on the couch with friends all around her. She claims to have seen the spirit. She said she was listening to the boys talk about the spirit when she saw boy 2's face as he was looking onto the balcony behind her. She turned around to see what he's looking at, and directly on the other side of the window was the shadow spirit on the rocking chair smiling at her, literally 3 feet away from her. That's when boy 2 sprinted towards it and burst through the French doors. I walk outside to find boy 2, and he's on the lawn, staring into the woods. I call his name and he looks up. All he says is, "Get everyone inside," and the tone of his voice makes me scared. I get all of us inside the cottage. This is when the phrase, "Come at me, bro," was gaining popularity. So you can imagine the drunk kid yelling that into the woods. It's terrible. I eventually get everyone inside. Boy 2 comes inside and tells everyone to clean up and that we should leave as soon as possible. Everyone has trash bags and we're clearing away the beer cans and whatever. Everyone goes inside the cottage and it's only me and boy 2 in the sunroom now. I look to him for answers and he says, "It's outside." I nod and start cleaning faster. The sooner we're out of here, the sooner we get away from that thing. As we're cleaning in the sunroom, we hear knocking on multiple windows. The entire sunroom's made of glass, but it's dark out, so you can't even see. And he says ignore it. I'm really scared now. Within 2 seconds, someone comes running out of the bathroom and says, "I'll kill whoever's knocking on the bathroom window." But everyone's accounted for. Someone else comes running out of the bedroom saying that there was knocking on the window as well. Everyone's freaking out, and me and boy 2 and our one other friend are the only sober ones now trying to calm people. We get the place clean and get outside and to the cars immediately. Everyone's getting into the trucks and I'm standing there. The guy looks relaxed, then all of a sudden looks worried and shoves me inside his truck. We peel out of there quick. A few days later, I end up hanging out with boy 2 and he tells me the story from his perspective. He said that when the boys started talking about the spirit, it appeared on the rocking chair behind girl 1. He said he made eye contact with it but couldn't look away. They were staring at each other, and that's when girl 1 and boy 2's expression changed. He said it was instinct to defend the people he's with and ran towards it. He said that the feeling he was getting from the cockgee was almost like daring him to do something. He said the second he got up, the cockgee stood up and ran into the woods, disappearing into a blur of the tree line. Boy 2 ran off the porch, looking around the lawn when he saw it standing there, right next to the woods. It was smiling at him, and he heard it mocking him, calling his name, then disappearing. He didn't see it again until everyone was getting inside the trucks, which explains why he suddenly pushed me inside. He said it was standing on the far end of the truck, super close to us. Later that night, when he dropped everyone off, they realised that they never locked the doors. So he went back to the cottage, but his friend was too scared to go in, so he goes in on his own. But the second he opens the door, he sees that thing standing inside. He locks the door as quick as he can, and they peel out of there. The sightings continued for a few days after that. We definitely weren't the only people on the res to have them kind of experiences. It was the talk of the res. Everyone was curious about what happened. Would it come back? What was it? All I know is that it terrified us, and it's 2018 now, and no one else has seen anything like it since. So one of my best friends and I met when we're 10 in 4th grade in 2009. A common theme in our friendship is horror. We both loved and got off immediately watching and playing scary video games together. At the time it was SCP on his laptop. Now fast forward until the summer of the senior year in high school. We drive up to this area of New Jersey called Hope Township. It's a really desolate farm area. Very few people out there. There's an area of road called Shades of Death. This is something we've looked into for years and always wanted to go to. It's about an hour drive from where we are in NJ. I remember it was rainy and extremely misty this one chilly July night. We get there and it's around 9 PM now. We're rolling down this long 10-mile desolate road when we spot a car going about 15 miles per hour in front of us. Keep in mind, we're in rural New Jersey roads. 40 miles per hour is the limit, and high beams are acceptable. We start going at their pace to match them. I keep telling him how weird this is as we're driving. He's looking at his phone for a couple of minutes saying they're probably just some old people. Then, we see a kid around our age turn his head and stare at us, absolutely fixated. My eyes have been glued on the road, so I decide to point this out to my friend, and I've realised that the car is packed with teenagers and another 4 stare at us. My friend says that he feels worried, as suddenly another car's behind us, also going the same speed. I get it was off, but I didn't really think how dangerous the situation is until the next day after we went home after my boy had crashed at my house. I eventually pass the car in front of us and speed up to loosen sight of them and peel off into a desolate road, and we see that they're following us. We managed to get away from them eventually and went back up the road again to explore the state reserve Jenny Jump State Forest, which is another story. But the next day, we hear on the news that some gang members have brutally murdered innocent people who are walking through the forest with knives. To this day, we still reflect on how badly the situation could have gone, and we're so thankful that nothing ever happened to us there. Back when I was 16, me and my friends spent a lot of time together at a caravan site on the outskirts of my town. One of my friends, Jack, had a little cabin there that his parents owned. We spent most of our evenings at the cabin, drinking and hanging out. We'd have the occasional barbecue or party, but mostly it's just a chill place to relax. Now one night, it was one of my friend's birthdays, so naturally we head there to go drinking. It was about 10 PM, so when we realised we'd run out of alcohol, the oldest one of us, or looking the oldest, Nathan and Tom, both volunteered to pop to the nearest corner store to get some drinks. While they were gone, we listened to music and play Xbox and have a good time. Just less than an hour went by before we heard a loud banging on the window. I pulled back the curtains with a wide grin on my face, thinking it's Nathan and Tom back with the drinks trying to scare us. So I decided to stick my tongue out and close the curtains. They can come in whenever they wanted, the door's open. Suddenly, a bang come from the window again, followed by a series of loud and violent bangs on the other side of the cabin. We then heard a man's voice shout out angrily, "Are you in there? And this isn't Nathan and Tom's." Jack's kind of worried and gets up to see what's going on. He just opened the door when A bald, stocky man in his 50s grabs Jack by the scruff of the neck. We don't know what to do. The man just shook Jack and yelled at him. I can't hear what he's saying, but he's absolutely furious. Then, the banging started up again. There were more men circling the cabin, smashing on the walls and windows. Me and my friends just stood on the edge of the room, as far away from the windows as we could, not doing or saying anything while Jack was being beaten outside. In hindsight, we should have helped him, but hell, from the sounds of it, there were 10 or so men outside and we're not going to face them. One of them shouting, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to kill him, over and over again. We couldn't even call the police because we'd spent the whole evening underage drinking by ourselves. I text Nathan and Tom to let them know what's happening and not to come back to the cabin, but they had arrived just as the men were hiding around the back. After what seemed like hours, it was probably only 30 minutes. It went silent. We tentatively went to open the door, but the men and Jack were gone. Worried about our friend, we all went looking for him and found him sat at the far end of the caravan, hands in his head. We asked if he's okay and he says go away. After that, we go back to the cabin in silence, waiting for him. He didn't come back. He stopped showing up for school. Turns out, he'd had a breakdown following that incident and spent a long time locked in his room. We only found out about this from his parents. I haven't spoke to Jack in years, and we never went back to the cabin following that night. I don't know who those men are or what they wanted with Jack, but it was a horrible experience. I remember a time when I was almost abducted as a kid. I lived in my grandmother's house out in the middle of nowhere in Texas. Our neighbours lived closer to the main country road, and my grandmother's house is at the back of a 5-acre lot. Across the street is an army depot. There's nothing but woods surrounding all of this. Now my parents are at work and my grandparents are in the house watching the Golden Girls. Now my grandfather bought me a bike as a gift. It was just as I turned 9 for my birthday. So I was riding my bike up our long driveway. Our neighbours to the left, a really old elderly woman. She had no one to visit her and talk to her, so often I played at her house and helped her with anything she wanted. That day, I want to show her my bike. She was sitting on her porch when I visit her. She had no errands or chores for me, so I talked to her for about 15 minutes and showed her my bike. Then, I returned to my own driveway. I had been riding back and forth for about 15 minutes, listening to music on my MP3 player, when I had this sudden nauseating pain in my gut. I look around, only to find a car passing by. I recognise it as my elderly neighbour's car and wave to her. She stopped long enough to talk to me. She then pulls into her driveway, just far enough that the tail end of her car wasn't in the street, and a white van marked with some electricity company's name and ladder on the roof passes by. Now, in our area, there's only one electric company. The truck's not ours, so I think it's weird, but dismiss it to talk to the neighbour. A good 10 minutes go by when I noticed the van was driving by once more and going in the direction it had come from. Maybe he was lost, I thought, and I kept talking to my neighbour. She gave me a bag of her garden tomatoes and cucumbers for my grandmother before telling me to run home. I watched her as she drove away. Then that sudden pain returned. I'd forgotten all about it. I look up to see the white van was driving in my direction, much quicker than it had done so before. Something inside me screamed to run, to do something. Whatever it was, I had to get away from it fast. I dropped my bags and ran across a small pasture to my elderly neighbour's house. She was no longer on the porch, but her house was much closer than my grandmother's. As I hopped over my neighbour's fence, the van sped up as it cut to my neighbour's driveway. I made a quick decision to run up the steps instead of running around the front of the house. My neighbour had a long wrap-around porch and her driveway small. If he had intentions on kidnapping me, it would have been too easy for him to catch me trying to run around the front of the house. I have tears in my eyes as my neighbour locked her doors and calls the police. She'd seen everything and calls my grandfather. It would have taken way too long for the police to come. My neighbour put me in her room and locked the door behind herself. Moments later, I heard banging on the front door. As terrified as I was, I looked out her bedroom window to see a tall and lean man standing on the porch. He looks like Michael Myers, aviator sunglasses and a dark beard that looks like a disguise. He bangs on the door, walking around the house. He was looking in the windows when my grandfather arrived, but the moment he saw him, he ran back to his van and sped off, never to be seen again. I'm 25 now and thankfully I never saw that van again. I hope I never do.